So guys, I'm sorry for not posting this video a few weeks ago, but it was very, very concerning what Tony Khan said about AEW ROH Final Battle that was actually last Friday. That they had around 3,000 people show up for the show, and I believe the arena that they had could have seated over 10,000 people. And he was saying it was a really great show and a really great attendance, and definitely that's also very concerning. And a lot of people are also talking about how you look at World's End and they have close to 8,000 tickets sold, but the Madison Square Garden show last night, that's actually a dark show, which means it's untelevised, drew over 10,000 people at Madison Square Garden, where AW is still trying to sell out the Nassau Coliseum. So, I mean, just to go back to ROH for a minute, definitely that is an extremely terrible and a very concerning turnout. And it's also, 3,000 is horrible. That's something that Impact Wrestling would do. And definitely there's been times where Impact Wrestling has done a lot more. But I think that there are a couple of things, and I think that what Tony Khan has to understand, number one, is that people can see through the bullshit. And that's one of the reasons why, people have turned on Tony Khan, is because he can't admit that something is a problem. And I think that there is a difference between being an optimist and then actually somebody who is lying to themselves. For example, I'm really motivated to do better in my filmmaking next year, but I'm definitely disorganized. I spend a lot too much time on my job. I have social anxiety, so it's hard for me to network with people. And then, I kind of give up too quickly. And then I've also talked about things like the 40-hour film project and other things that have kind of been living rent-free in my head for a long time. There's a lot of accountability I need to take, but people will respect me if I kind of say, what, my journey as a filmmaker is going to be a little bit hard because how I budget my time and also, my mindset. So definitely I would be respected for saying that than just saying, well, everything is great, or I'm going to, end up in Hollywood by the end of 2024 or something like that. People respect honesty. And if I said something like, what, I have a couple of goals next year with my filmmaking and I need to put in the hard work to make those things happen. For example, I'm planning to go to 5 different. I have 5 more states to visit to have hit all 50 states. So I have a goal to visit to do a trip to 4 of the states this summer. So if I said I'm going to spend a couple months learning my drone, I'm going to spend a couple of months learning how to do outdoor cinematography, and just because I really want the video to be good. I think more people will respect that because they know that I'm saying that I'm optimistic about the future, but I recognize that there are challenges for myself to become better, and I am honest about that, and I will talk about how I will overcome that. And I also think with that, it's showing two things. It's showing a reality check, and that's also showing an organization or a plan for organization, because I think with AEW, they're very disorganized. And then I think another thing that's bad about the ROH show is you held El Vikingo, and I think you had Black Taurus and a couple of other people. So one thing that Tony Khan does is that he signs a lot of people from different companies, or they may be part of AAA or TNA or another company, and then he brings them in for one show. And then to me, I don't really like that, because that kind of is almost like I can't use my roster, I can't fill a card, I can't create storylines. And I also think the other thing too is that I'm okay with him having the Von Erichs. Obviously that worked, but it's a little annoying when you have a Von Erich, I think a Von Erich memorial match and they actually win, because then it's kind of predictable. And then the other thing I want to say is that another concerning thing is Athena, because a lot of people were saying that she's done a really great job as the ROH Women's Champion. And, if she's doing such a great job, she's kind of almost in the Jade Cargill role, where it's why don't we have her on regular television? Why isn't she feuding with Toni Storm? or Chris Statlander's title. That's actually kind of concerning. And then I hate talking about the racial thing. Both of them were black women, and they never had a chance to go after the AEW Women's Championship. So it does kind of it's not good. It's not good representation because it goes down to that stereotype of, well, if you're black and you have a bunch of potential, there's just some things that you're not going to have, and one of them is the women's championship, like the stereotype of, a black person with potential not getting recognized or getting the second place or the third place championship. That's what it kind of looks like, really. But if Athena is so good and people are talking so highly of her, why don't they actually have her hold the TBS title, have her feud for the women's championship, or they do something like have her hold like two women's championship titles and defend both, or do a title versus title match. I think that would be better if somebody's causing that much buzz. Utilize them. And I also think the other thing too is that, like I've said, I really think that another big issue with ROH is like nobody knows that it's really actually a show, because one of the big problems is that I believe ROH is just the dark matches for Collision. So is it on television? Is it on the internet? Is it just a bunch of dark show stuff? And the problem is that, they need to kind of advertise it, or they need to be like, okay, check out ROH on YouTube, or when you see ads for AEW, you need to say, please check out ROH. They need to do a lot more marketing of what ROH is in the realms of AEW. It's just a little ridiculous that they don't kind of market it that well. And then also, too, that I've always kind of said this with AEW, that they need to kind of they need to kind of really work on their rosters. Definitely, as I said, maybe take 1/3, put this 1/3 on Dynamite, put another 1/3 on Collision, and another 1/3 on ROH. But with Dynamite, you should do with their 1/3. It should be both Dynamite and Rampage. But that way, you split up the rosters really, and you have really good shows and you have compelling storylines. So I think that would be good. But if it gets to a point where somebody is too big for the brand, you may have to say, okay, well, Athena, you are doing too good of a job here. Maybe we should do a title versus title, or maybe we should do something where you give up the title and then you're going to face Toni Storm or Anna Jay right now, the TBS title, and that way kind of move yourself upwards, because we need to have some really good women's feud and all that stuff. I think that would be appropriate. But I do think ROH is very disorganized. And I also think my other big concern is, is Tony Khan what is Tony Khan's chain of commands? And I think that's the big question a lot of people have with Tony Khan, is that, who's helping him do those shows? Is he doing everything? Is he doing the writing? Is he doing the booking for, Collision, Dynamite, ROH, and Rampage? Because that is a lot for one person. And I think that another thing he needs to do is that, obviously, I think Bryan Danielson wants to retire, and he definitely, was like, okay, well, if anything happens to Tony Khan, I'm going to inherit the company and then give it my direction. So what I would say is that maybe what you need to do with Bryan Danielson, you can see, like, okay, well, since this is what you want, your goal is you're going to get Collision and ROH, or you're going to get ROH and Rampage, and you're going to book both those. No, this is what I would do. I would give Bryan Danielson ROH and Collision, and then I'll give Tony Khan Dynamite and Rampage. And then what I'll say is, okay, Bryan Danielson, they want us to have more pay-per-views. So what we're going to do this year is that we're going to have 12 pay-per-views minimum, and 6 of them are going to be ROH pay-per-views. And we're going to work hard on marketing, and we're going to work hard on taking 1/3 of the roster, and we're going to make them be part of ROH and actually help them kind of reach the next level and be ready for Dynamite. Like, it's going to be almost like an NXT brand. And definitely, we're gonna make sure our house shows are packed. And if you and you need to live up to this, we need you. And then you find a second in command if something happens to Bryan Danielson, and that's kind of what you do, really. I do think that if it's all like Tony Khan, there's a lot of issues with that. And then the other big issue with ROH is World's End, because the big problem is, I think what happened was Tony Khan was focusing a lot on ROH. Mind you, not a lot of people knew that ROH was having a pay-per-view, and now you have World's End, and definitely that's bad because, as I've said before, that I think it was like 2 weeks ago was 2 weeks ago was the ROH show, and the problem is that when you have one person booking both shows, what happens is that it's just too much work for them. So what happens is now they're kind of rushing through a lot of things now, and actually World's End does not look like a good card. And tomorrow morning I need to do a video, or maybe tonight after they post like the final card, but there's a lot of rushed matches on World's End. Like definitely Abaddon and Anna Jay, that feels a little rushed. They're trying to maybe do Strickland versus Keith Lee, and I think that not a lot of people are not gonna like how they're gonna get there. And then also with Edge and Christian, the fact that they already had a match on free television, now they're trying to overcompensate by having a Dynamite match, by having another match but no disqualification. I think, and then also their Dynamite match, they had, one of the wrestlers' moms actually interfere. That's a little, that doesn't feel that good. And then also too, you have Samoa Joe versus MJF too, and it's going to be another, like match with no stipulation. You're not going to kind of go upwards, because when they had Adam Page versus Swerve, it was good that they had that, and then they had the Texas Death Match. Obviously you need to kind of do something different the second time. It can't be the same thing. So part of the reason why, World's End does not look like a good card is because, I kind of fear that Tony is doing something like booking all these shows and pay-per-views, and he doesn't have enough time for quality, and then he's saying it's great when it's not great. And then the other issue is that what he will do is that he'll get out his checkbook, and then he'll be like, okay, well, I'm going to sell El Vikingo and Black Taurus, and maybe I'll bring the Motor City Machine Guns and a couple of other people, and we're going to have like these wrestlers that can do all these flips and tour de force type of stuff. Or he's going to do something like he did at All Out in Chicago, where I actually walked out on the main event because it wasn't good, because I felt he was doing this too much, which is that he's gonna make 14, 15 matches, including a couple of preliminary matches, and then he's gonna be like, okay, well, that's a great show because everybody wants to see everybody, and definitely it just feels kind of rushed out, and people just know when it's actually not about quality. It's about, well, I think a good show is having 15 matches, and some people like the Acclaimed, are having an 8 or 9 minute match when they should be having a 15, 16 minute match, So, it highlights a bunch of problems. Like, I think really ROH really highlights a bunch of problems, and Tony has to be honest with himself. Like 3,000 people is not a good show. I think that he really needs to kind of do a lot of revamping of the company. Like they said, like 2024 needs to be the revamp year. And as I said, that if he has a bunch of wrestlers that want to run a show, he needs to take like maybe 5 people and they all work together very well and be like, okay, well, you're going to do Collision and ROH. And that be that, really, because, as he said, I have to divide my empire. And also, too, it's getting to a point where it's affecting other shows like World's End. That's an issue. And I think the other big issue I see is that World's End is supposed to be their debut New York City area pay-per-view. And obviously, New York City is a big market. And they really, really, really need to make sure they treat it like a big deal. And I think that's also kind of been the problem with Tony Khan, is that sometimes he doesn't treat his pay-per-views like a big deal, like Wembley. Like he did a great job with that, but it was like towards like the last 3 weeks he was doing a majority of the matches. But you look at this show, he's still trying to create matches. The card looks a little bit like a clusterfuck, and really, I think that another big thing that I'm not liking is that he spends way too much Dynamite time actually making matches for like his pay-per-views. Like he should do a little bit more in Collision and Rampage, and definitely Rampage as well, really, just to kind of establish that it is a company, it is a show where matches are going to happen, really. But I think from this video there's a lot of ROH problems. I think that also him just saying that everything is fine with a 3,000 with 3,000 attendee show is very concerning. He needs a bit of a reality check, and there's no problem in saying, you know what, I'm proud of the staff. I'm proud of all the wrestlers. I'm proud of the staff. And 3,000 is still 3,000 people, and I appreciate every fan that's there, but we need to go bigger and better, and this is my plan to make it bigger and better. And I say this because I believe in the potential of the roster. I believe we need to utilize the roster at its full capacity. We don't do that at its full capacity and full quality. And I also will say that I Tony Khan, just take on too much, and that's been my weakness. And I need to change that because I want a better show for everybody, and I also want to make sure that the quality is always going to be there. That when anybody watches, an ROH pay per view, or a Dynamite pay per view, or Dynamite or a AEW show, it's all quality is there, and that's one of the reasons why we started the company, because we saw like how WWE dropped some quality, like with their shows. Definitely things have gotten better with them, but in order to be counterculture to WWE, we need to ultimately look at our weaknesses and do that every single time and be the best that we can be. And if there are problems, I need to come up with solutions. And one of the big problems is our infrastructure and definitely how I take on too much, and definitely that's affecting the qualities. And also, I have to not lie to myself. 3,000 is not a good. 3,000 is not a good turnout. While I appreciate all the fans for showing up, and I also appreciate everybody who worked on that show, cast and crew, and then also I want people to know that realistically 3,000 is not good, but I'm not trying to put anybody down for it. I'm putting myself at a higher level of accountability, and he should be doing that, not talking about how great it is. So it's definitely very concerning, and maybe the issue is Tony Khan is lying to himself.